Okay, everybody, welcome back to Patriot to the Core podcast. This is Thad Forrester, and it's episode number 60. And this is a special episode because it represents the 8th anniversary of the death of my brother Mark. And so, once again, this year I have kind of a special episode to talk. This is solely really about Mark and his life and his last few days and last little while on Earth in Afghanistan. And so I have with me today, now he's Major Wes Wilson. He was captain at the time in 2010, and he was Mark's ODA Detachment Commander. So Wes, man, thank you for joining me in this tight window that we have to speak.
It's my pleasure to, be a part of this and help share and contribute to Mark's legacy. He was a one-of-a-kind guy. True professional and master of his craft. I'm very fortunate to have worked with him.
Well, you were a big help in Mark's book, My Brother in Arms. You're quoted and referenced multiple spots in the book. And so, man, you helped us out with maps and just clarification and all kinds of good stuff. I mean, really, you were a great reference. I would like to start with, can you take us back and tell us about that final mission? I guess it was Mark was killed in day 2 of it. How long was the mission supposed to be? How big was this thing, and how many people were involved? And from what countries? Was it just U.S. and Afghan nationals, or did it also involve Aussies or whoever?
So the mission was planned for 3 days, and there was potential for a 4th day. In terms of the size, there was probably 150 to 200 compounds that we had to clear through, probably about 30 kilometers in length, and at some points it was only a kilometer wide of small village buildings and their agricultural area. In some places it was almost 4 kilometers wide. So in terms of personnel, there was 2 U.S. ODAs, so that's about 24 Americans with their Air Force combat controller attachments. So there's 2 there, and then Navy EOD attachments and mechanics and signal intercept guys, and then as far as foreign forces in our sector, so it was multiple. There's 2 ODAs in our sector, but there were 2 or 3 other ODAs participating in the clearance, as well as the Special Forces Company headquarters. And there were Australians in the valley, but not in our sector. And then in terms of aerial support, it was primarily American, but and I can't recall if during this, the 3-day period we were clearing, if we had support from the French Mirage aircraft. But I know Mark had worked with French Mirage aircraft on other missions leading up to that while we were there together. So,
hey, what did he say about the French pilots? Do you remember?
Well, yeah, it's funny you bring that up. So it's not. I don't blame the pilots per se, but every country had a different ROE rules of engagement that they had to work within as per their national caveats, and I don't recall exactly what the French rules of engagement were, but they did not fly as low as the American aircraft did, and I don't know the capabilities of their pod, which gives them sight on the ground. But essentially, Mark had a lot of frustration when working with the French. One, because of the language barrier. Obviously, they spoke English, but it's tough for a guy from Alabama to understand French version of English, or French accent of English. And then 2, they just couldn't get as low or see what Mark needed them to see. And I know Mark did a phenomenal job of describing the terrain, because we got nothing but compliments on his work from the helicopter pilots and the A-10 pilots and all the other pilots that work with him. They would always get on track very quickly. But the French Mirages, and I don't know whether it was like I said, their ROE, they couldn't get them low enough, or the capabilities of their pod and their aircraft, but they just could never seem to find what Mark was trying to describe, and I'm confident that wasn't due to any shortcomings on his part, because he got nothing but compliments from the aircraft. But yeah, he had a lot of frustration when the French came. He would just send them off, and we'd probably back away and wait 30 minutes or an hour until another aircraft would come on station that he would find more productive.
Huh. What did Mark bring to your team?
Well, you never want to send a person where you can send a bomb, and so Mark's job was to bring in the bombs, and he did a very good job of doing that. And I think like I said before, the pilots, whether fixed wing or rotary wing, they were happy to work with him. One, because Mark and the ODAs he worked with, us and prior to us, so was always able to find targets for the aircraft. But he just was able to build rapport, and he has a good country voice and really kind and high energy, and I don't know, just a voice that the aircraft trusted, and so he was able to get us whatever we needed. And I think, and that goes into mission planning too. He would always call the unit that would be supporting the day of our mission. He'd call them in advance and explain what we would expect to see on the battlefield, what we'd expect to encounter, and tell them that. And so the aircraft always felt comfortable before we even needed them, of what the situation was going to be like. So, like I said, he's a very thorough guy, extremely intelligent, and able to build rapport, which is what we needed. And he would bring in the rain, bring in bombs whenever we needed it, and right on target all the time.
Did he really seem like like a kid in a candy store? And that really, he loved what he did, didn't he?
He did. A lot of people say passionate about their job, but for Mark, like, being a combat controller definitely did not seem like a job for him. Like, I think, God made him for that purpose. And he just enjoyed it. He loved being in the military, loved being in the Air Force. He loved where we were at, doing what we were doing. He was just happy to show up to work every day, and full of energy, always upbeat. Yeah, he loved it. It definitely was not a job for him. He enjoyed what he was doing.
Yeah. So, Wes, what about those now? This is a pretty big mission. Oh, by the way, so you said you had to clear several different villages or compounds. I mean, really, what was the deal? Was there Taliban supposedly hiding out in these areas, or what was the purpose?
So the village the village we were at was called O'Shea, and it was on the north side of where two rivers meet. So the rivers right below us, the Helmand River and the Saker River, kind of came to a Y. And so there was a bridge to the west of us on the Saker River that had washed out. I want to say like in 2006 there was bad flooding in Afghanistan, and then a bridge over the Helmand, just like straight south of us, that had sunk or something like that. Or maybe it didn't exist. I don't know, but there's really no way across the river except for when the water was low, other than like raft ferries, so they couldn't bring big trucks. And the roads in that part of Afghanistan are not real wide, and they weren't paved, and there's not a lot of good roads in Afghanistan at all, at least in the rural areas. And so what the Taliban had done, since there was a base with U.S. forces in O'Shea, they kind of cut off O'Shea, trying to turn the population against the Americans. And in August, and this mission, when Mark was killed, was late September, but by the middle of August, they did not even have the flour to make bread in O'Shea. And we were talking about trying to have the Americans fly in supplies via helicopter just to help out the population. So they're kind of getting squeezed out. I wouldn't say that the population was turning against us at all, but they were just kind of starting to leave the area because it was difficult for them to live, by the time we got to mid-September. And the way the Taliban would do that is they would cut off the roads, they'd do roadblocks, and they knew the population better than us, obviously being from the same country and sharing the culture and language. So if they knew it to be people that were supportive of Afghan defense forces or the U.S. forces in the area, they would just burn their supplies or they'd take it. Or if they were, just capitalists trying to get supplies there to make money, and they were going to jack up the price once it got to O'Shea, then they would just tax, these entrepreneurs trying to make money on a population. So it was just a real.
Wes, I lost you.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
The village Shah Mashad that we're trying to clear. Actually, on the map, it had 3 different names. I think Jangalak and something else. We just called it all Shah Mashad. I think it was probably a Russian map, quite a bit dated. But yeah, it had a high population that was supportive to the Taliban. At least they weren't for the government of Afghanistan, and so they had surrounded their village with IEDs. So before we could even get there, we were trying to essentially breach a minefield, and then like any obstacle in terms of talking tactically, you want to have observation and fields of fire on the obstacle. So our guys were trying to detonate the IEDs in place before we drove through, and trying to do that while under observation and fire. So it took a lot of effort just to get into the village before we started clearing compounds. It was a very deliberate and well planned fight on both parts, both the U.S. and the Taliban.
So did you do a lot of that clearing on the 28th, or was that prior to even the 28th? With the minefields and to get to the villages?
No, because if you, at the time, the U.S. ROEs, we could not do night operations. And so we got up real early the morning of the 28th and started breaching the IED belt, and then cleared all day on the 28th. And yeah, that's another part of the story and the relationship Mark and I held. So Mark, as the combat controller, he needed to have the ODA commander, the ground force commander's initials, which was me, to send to the aircraft before they could drop or fire any ordnance, any rounds or bombs or anything. And so we were always side by side. And then Captain Willie Lyles was the ODA commander of the other ODA, and he had been injured August 28th, and his replacement had not shown up yet in country. And so for this mission, I was the only, commissioned officer. And so the first day, Mark was in my truck beside me as we had always operated. And then the next day, George Earhart, who was the other, he's a JTAC, he was tired, because he had done the whole first day. And I think Mark was also anxious. He wanted to be on the ground and clear buildings. Probably more fun than sitting in the trucks with me, which is a better comms platform. And we had the roads are kind of elevated above the villages and the fields, so we could see a little bit better. But he wanted to give George a break, and so George sat with me in the trucks on the 29th, and Mark was on the ground that day with the dismounted element.
Yeah, that kind of haunts George to this day, I think. It haunts me too. I mean, that was the only day that Mark was not within arm's reach of me. Yeah. Well, what were yours and your team's expectations of, what would happen with this mission?
I think, Captain Willie Lyles, he had stepped on the IED the month before, and then I think August 8th of that year, we had 2 Americans, one from my team, Del Roman, and one from the other team had been struck by small arms fire, but they weren't serious injuries, either one of those. And Willie's was from the IED, so I don't think any of us would have been surprised by an IED strike. Small arms fire, we have our body armor and helmets. Maybe we're expecting some wounds, but I don't think any of us expected casualties, and so that was kind of difficult for us to bear. And we had read all of the intelligence reports, and like I said, this was a well-planned mission, thoroughly planned and rehearsed, both on the U.S. and with our Afghan partners. And we had never seen anything about a Dragunov sniper rifle, especially not anything with a scope And so when Cal and Mark were killed by a sniper who had a Dragunov sniper rifle with the scope, that was a shocker for us.
I didn't remember that he had a scope. Wow. Maybe I never knew. I don't know. Maybe I forgot that. So what about on the 29th? Okay, so you find a place and you sleep. I know Mark and George, I think, stayed up talking to aircraft for a while. I don't know. Did you and Mark, did y'all talk any that night, late at night?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we were always within arm's reach. Every single mission we had done since we showed up in the beginning of July. My team, Mark, was there before I got there. And so I know I would have slept right by him, and he and George would have rotated shifts on the radio, talking to the air coverage that we had that night. So we probably talked about, where we had cleared up to that point, and then what the game plan was for the next day, and is probably how we would have closed out the night. So Mark and George would have talked to me about what their game plan was, where they're going to have the aircraft look that night while we rested. And then in the morning, we'd have gone over our plan again, and they'd probably have briefed me back on everything that the aircraft saw over the course of the night. And then, and that's kind of when the switch out happened, and George stayed with me that day, and Mark went forward with Master Sergeant Matt Duffy, who's now Sergeant Major, retired, and they went forward from there.
And how many people was it with that dismounted element that Mark was with, Mark and Matthew?
So the entire dismounted element, there was, I think, 3 or maybe 4 U.S. groups of dismounts, probably like 3 to 6 guys apiece. And then with them, they would have had, 5 or 6 Afghans, whether they be Army or police Afghans. So altogether in their dismounted element, it was probably almost 10 guys. But I think it was Matt and Cal and Mark and a linguist named Steve Dave, which we can talk about more if you want, and then a squad of Afghan Army, maybe 4 to 6 of those guys.
Okay.
Were with them. And then there would have been 2 or 3 other elements kind of with a similar composition and makeup. Okay.
So that day, we've gotten a lot of the pictures that we know of off of Mark's camera, and we check the dates, and there's several pictures made those last 2 days. One of those is one of those we've posted a lot that has Mark sitting on a little motorcycle. There's some where y'all have found some guys and zip-tied their wrist, mm-hmm. and you've explained some. I've actually reached out to you, I think, to tell me what's going on. But do you mind just kind of describing? Y'all went in somewhere and you had tied some guys up or tied their wrist up, and how long did you tie them up for, and kind of what was the reasoning for that?
As the dismount element would clear through a village, anytime there were military-age males, they would kind of consolidate them and send them have them escorted out towards the mounted element, which is where I was at. And we would keep the military-age males in a group that way. And in order to maintain speed on the objective, we'd continue to clear, and then before late afternoon would stop clearance, and then at that time we would go back and start talking to the military-age males about, do like a little bit tactical questioning about what they were doing, and we'd always we'd have a packet that we would attach with them of like what building they came from and what all was found in the building, whether there was, rifle or IED materials or batteries, for an IED, or radios, or det cord, homemade explosives, stuff like that. So,
yeah,
and if there was any incriminating evidence, then we would obviously turn them over to the Afghan police or the Afghan army. They'd go to their custody for prosecution.
Some of the pictures they're smiling in, it's just kind of funny. That they are kind of detained and smiling for a picture.
Well, that might be at the instruction of the American through the interpreter.
Yeah, okay.
So, and some of them are innocent. We treated them well unless there was a reason to treat them otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So, Wes, is it true that day on the 29th, it wasn't as active as the 28th until all hell broke loose and that last little while? Is that right? Was it almost boring there for just a short period of time on the 29th?
Yeah, the 29th in the morning, so again, we started around sunrise, and the whole morning until about noon had gone very smoothly and fast, a lot quicker than the day before, and partly due to the fact that we had already passed the IED belt, so the mounted element was able to move very, very quickly. And I think the villagers knew we had come to stay. We'd stay the night, and so anyone who was they didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. So people who were innocent probably just fled the area, and then the people who were there to fight were probably preparing their fighting positions in the morning, since they knew we were going to continue to go. And so early afternoon is when things just kind of kicked off. We started receiving a lot of indirect fire from a recoilless rifle from across the river. It was pretty accurate, almost hit the Humvees several times. And then right after that, the dismounted element got into a firefight, and that's when, immediately after that is when they got into their firefight, and Cal and Mark were killed. And so it was well coordinated, on the part of the Taliban to lead with indirect fire and then start with the small arms fire. And they were able to hit both the mounted and dismounted elements pretty much simultaneously. So they were a well prepared enemy, and well equipped in comparison to what we'd faced elsewhere, with the recoilless rifle and a sniper rifle with the scope, and they had a PKM machine gun. So they were prepared.
What can you tell us, Wes, about those final moments? I mean, we got the account in the book from a few different people, and of course we've also got the account from the Lowbird, the Apache pilot, Scott, who, by the way, just texted me. I'm looking forward to, I'm going to talk to him soon, see if I can get him to, he's a very private guy, but trying to get him on the podcast to talk about it again, because his testimony was vital, for the Mark Silver Star citation. Mm-hmm. But we have his point of view, because he was low enough to watch with his naked eye, mostly. And then, there's just, several of the Afghans were killed, right? And so, and I didn't know how close was Steve Dave, and what can you tell us about those I don't know, was it a matter of 20 minutes, or kind of what time period did that, when you started, or was it kind of dragging on for a while?
No, it was pretty quick. I would say within 15, 20 minutes, like I said, I was in the mounted element, so things just started exploding around us all of a sudden. So we were moving, to get out of the kill zone, as you say. And as we were, trying to move to somewhere where we weren't getting shot at, the dismounted element started taking fire. And I recall Mark saying that Cal was down, and so that was concerning. And then I had communication with Mark, and I know Mark was talking to the aircraft as well. And then all of a sudden, Mark was down, and I think it was the aircraft that came across the net and said he was down. Matt Duffy still had not called, so I wasn't quite sure on his status. And I guess before Cal even went down, an ANA soldier was shot. That was the first casualty, and then Cal, and so I was trying to get reports from Mark, and then all of a sudden I didn't have any comms with Mark, and then the aircraft told me that they had lost comms with Mark, and then that's kind of when I started panicking, or becoming concerned, and so I called the other dismounted elements. So I had to switch channels and see what they knew, and they were aware that Mark had gone off comms and that Cal was down, and so they started moving towards Matt's position. And then probably within a matter of...
How far away were they?
From me, I was probably... Oh, they were, I don't know, 75 to 100 meters apart. But there's a lot of... Really? The way they irrigate, their fields aren't like, like an 80-acre field or a 40-acre field like in the U.S. Their fields are like an acre, and they're surrounded on four sides by a canal. That's how they irrigate, and they'll just move like a clod of dirt, and then it'll irrigate the field, and they'll move it back, and then the water will continue. So And they have, rows of, all their canals have like pomegranate trees and other types of trees around it. So every little 1 acre square, you can't really see what's on the next square because it has trees around it. So it was tough. I mean, it was tough movement for those dismounted guys for those 3 days. Every couple hundred meters, you're trying to jump over another canal, and you got trees all around you, or corn stalks you're walking through, or wet rice fields, or wheat fields, and or just an orchard of pomegranates. It's tough terrain to try and fight through, especially knowing there's someone that could be in that field or at the next canal, which the Taliban uses a trench line basically, because they could get into like chest defilade and fire from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was probably about 150 to 200 meters from the compound where Cal and Mark were hit, and then, like I said, we had 3 or 4 dismounted elements spread out across about a 2,000 meter wide area of green zone, a vegetated area. So they'd have 250, 500 meters between them.
Were Mark and Cal and their team already in this compound when they started taking fire?
I think they were approaching it. The A&A guys had gone around to one side, and they saw the Taliban guy with the rifle, and so an A&A guy, I think he had a saw, a squad automatic weapon, like a small machine gun, a light machine gun, and he got in the prone position and fired at the Taliban, and the Taliban guy shot him kind of like in the shoulder, but while he was in the prone, so that went like down into his torso, and so he was killed pretty quickly. And then Cal and Mark and Matt entered the compound.
So he was hiding out there in the green, in the brush.
Well, he was in the canal. He was in the canal.
Okay.
So he had good cover behind that little berm, and so he hit Cal from a covered position. And the Taliban did a good job. They would initiate with a machine gun. They had a PKM, and they would use the sound of the machine gun to mask the sound of the sniper rifle.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
So there were 2 of them in that canal, is that right? Was it like a spotter and a sniper?
Well, they weren't co-located, so they kind of had it as like a perpendicular, so the machine gun was hitting that compound from a right angle to where the sniper was at. So they kind of had 2 positions.
How long after Cal went down did Mark go down? Was it like 1 or 2 minutes later?
Yes.
Where was Steve Dave?
Steve Dave, I think, got pinned down with that A&A element that was on the outside of the compound where the one guy was already killed.
Yeah, I think Steve Dave must have been a pretty good dude. I think Mark really liked him. Is that what kind of relationship did he have with y'all, Wes?
They had a very strong relationship, and I think Mark. Well, Steve Dave was very good at his job as a linguist. He kind of made, for every village, what frequencies the Taliban would be talking on and what the kind of code words were, and what he just kind of knew the area very well, and he kept a record of it. So he, as a local national linguist, he took his job very seriously and helped out the ODAs quite a bit.
I mean, it's got to be very risky for him, doesn't it?
Yeah, he had lost, by this point, he had already had one brother killed by the Taliban, and he was a policeman in Kandahar. And then a couple of years, I think maybe it was 2011 or early 2012, his mom was killed by the Taliban as well. So, but Steve Dave is Hazaran, which is like, I guess tradition says they're descendants of Genghis Khan, so they kind of look Mongolian and not so much like they have a different appearance to them as the Pashtuns, and the Hazarans are Shia Muslim, or the Pashtuns are Sunni Muslim. And I think just like the being from a religious minority and the persecution that Steve Dave faced within his own society, I think Mark is a compassionate guy and kind of had a soft spot in his heart for Steve Dave's situation.
What was the result of this? I guess what happened after that? Did y'all finish and did you go another day, or what in the following days? What happened to that area?
Yeah. So, immediately after that, the other dismounted element was able to work their way over towards Matt Duffy, and the sniper who had killed Cal and Mark had been killed. And then we called in the medevac to have them evac back to Tarrant Cal, and then we kind of secured the area. We did not clear any further that night, and that night, I was trying to write up the citations for Cal and Mark and send them up over the radio and through some equipment we have that can send data messages. So that was tough. That was a long night trying to, recall all their contributions up over the course of the deployment and make sure their awards were done properly before their, burial ceremonies and stuff like that. And then the next day, it's kind of a blur, honestly. I think we cleared the next day and finished up the village. We didn't have a whole lot left, and that was kind of the Taliban's last stand. So there was more Taliban casualties that day than just the sniper. And so that we didn't even get shot at the next day when we cleared. And then I think after that we did get our ODA was extracted and pulled to Tarrant Cal for the memorial ceremony for Cal and Mark. The Sajudif commander at the time was Brigadier General Austin Miller, who is now a 4-star and was previously the JSOC commander, the Delta Force commander, when he was a 3-star. And now he's the 4-star commander in Afghanistan, and replaced General Nicholson. And he was there. And I remember he made a comment to us, and at the time, I just thought it was kind of harsh. He's like, death is a part of war, and this is why we're all here. And I was just like, wow, geez, there's not a lot of sympathy from this guy. And then he came back in January for an Afghan local police graduation ceremony that was held, and he came out to us, and he pulled us all aside, the whole ODA, and he's like, hey, I've just been watching you guys and keeping track of you after what happened in September, and you can really tell the character of an ODA after something tragic like that happened, and you guys have done a good job of continuing the fight and get after the enemy. He's like, sometimes some teams just can't handle it and they kind of shut down, and you don't see a lot of productivity out of them anymore. And I've approached every day in my career, and I think the rest of the guys on the team would say that too. Everyone that knew Cal and Mark is, no one would want us to quit, and I think everyone used that deployment and that day as a motivation to always give your best and to use every opportunity to share their story and continue their legacy. So that was a proud moment, I think, for us all to have honored Cal and Mark's sacrifices in a way that the highest, special operations general in the country at the time, and now he's in charge of all of Afghanistan, that recognized their sacrifices and the team's continued, desire to honor their legacy.
Yeah. You wrote us a letter. I think we got it around Thanksgiving time of that year, 2010. And one thing you said, you remember Mark talking about how he was looking forward to Thanksgiving and all the good food. But you also said commerce seemed to open up immediately in that area, at least in one of those villages, right after that battle. Is that am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think talking about the Thanksgiving, there's three hard times a year for me. Probably, one is around the anniversary of their death, which is tough. Thanksgiving's probably harder just because I remember how much Mark was looking forward to it, because he was going to be home for Thanksgiving that year. And he just told me everything that your mom was going to be preparing and described it in such detail. I was excited for him to be home. And I think about your family and probably how hard that Thanksgiving was, and that's tough. And then the next hardest holiday for me is Father's Day, because Cal left 2 girls, and also Mark was not married and was not in a, he wasn't engaged, wasn't in a serious relationship at the time, but you could tell he was going to be a great father, and he really enjoyed he asked me about my kids all the time. At the time, I only had 2 children, and I remember we had coordinated, and he was going to come check on my oldest son, was just 1 at the time, and he was going to go, see my wife and visit with my kids when he got home. He promised me he was going to do that. That's just tough as Father's Day, because I know Mark would have liked to have been a father.
Yeah, definitely. He did. He wanted to be married and be a dad.
Yeah, but in terms of commerce, yeah, before we had even finished clearing to the end of the village, there was already jingle trucks, which is like a more rugged version of a semi truck in the U.S. They were already lined up. I wouldn't want to say scores, but there's probably 5 or 10 of them lined up for us to finish our mission, and then so that they could pass through and get to O'Shea and deliver goods. Because of the bazaar, the shopping area in O'Shea probably had like 400 shops like established, but prior to the mission, there was maybe only 20 open. And so within a matter of weeks after that mission, they probably had 80 shops open. So it quadrupled the commerce coming in and out of that area. So and that's another reason why it was just tough to swallow when we went back to Afghanistan 11 months later, and the next time to Kandahar province, but to know that area in Uruzgan U.S. forces had left is like, wow, we made a big difference, and I know that people appreciated it. And I know there was a village elder that had written a letter to your family and thanked your family and Cal's family for the sacrifices, and was very appreciative. And then I found out he was killed, what was it, 2012, 13, 14, something like that. He hit an IED, but he had stepped up just from being a village elder, and he was kind of young to be a village elder, but he kind of tried to stay behind the scenes because of the threat that comes with responsibility in that country, in that environment. And he had ended up becoming either the chief of police or the district governor, but he hit an IED, a couple years later and was killed. And he had a very young son, about the age of my oldest boy now. It was, maybe a little bit older. He was 2 or 3 at the time in 2010. And so I think about his family a lot. And but that guy definitely made the most of the situation and tried to transfer some of the burden from, foreigners in his country, trying to provide security and development, to where, he stepped up and did that for his community, and was grateful for the opportunity, and despite the risk, stepped up, and he ended up paying the ultimate sacrifice as well. So
yeah,
I just wish there was more guys.
Ismail.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he was concerned. He wondered if all Americans thought that all Afghans were Talib.
Yeah, that's right. And he was a smart guy and very humble and intelligent, and would take the time to explain, cultural nuances that maybe we didn't get. And he would explain to us what the underlying problem was between different tribes and villages. And if every Afghan was like Muhammad Ismail, there would be no need for Americans to be there in the capacity that we are now.
Yeah. Wes, do you remember the sniper's name that killed Mark?
Yeah, his name was Haji Abdul Halik.
Yeah. You told us that, and I had his name in the book, and this was one of those where I wanted my brother Joseph to help out with kind of the final edit, and he was saying I wouldn't put his name in there, Thad. And so anyway, after some talk, I went ahead and pulled it out, And surprisingly, the Air Force, when they reviewed it, AFSOC, they did not suggest to pull it out because I had it in at that point. But I pulled it out at his request.
Yeah, I'll never forget that name. Yeah, he was when we were laying out the dead Talibs, for their families to come and recover them, or for the villagers to move them to a point where their families could take those bodies and prepare them for burial. He was a big guy, and he was a little bit older too. He's probably in his early 40s and over 6 foot and stocky build. And some of the stories, corroborated, made sense, like that when shop owners would say, "Oh, well, Haji Abdul Halik, beat me up and took all my money." I was like, "What?" Like, I didn't get it. And then upon seeing him, it made more sense, because he was just a big guy and probably a natural leader within the Taliban based upon his size, for sure. And being older, I would imagine he probably fought in the Mujahideen against the Russians, especially with the possession of a sniper rifle, which is difficult to come by out there. So,
well, Wes, what else would you like to say? Maybe we should wrap it up now. You're pretty quick.
I'm glad that Mark's fortunate to have a family and a brother like you that takes the time to share his legacy. And I, as a teammate of Mark's, I appreciate the continued interaction I've had with you and your family over the last 8 years. It definitely helps me process it all, and I know it helps Matt and the other guys. So we all appreciate the relationship that has been created despite the circumstances. I know that all of us that worked with Mark and Cal take every opportunity we can to share their story. Yeah, I don't know if you've talked to Brian Anderson at all. But he has a foundation.
Much, no.
Yeah. No, it definitely affected all of us, but we're all better for having served with those guys. They set the bar high, extremely professional, and just looking forward to the day I guess we get to see him again on the other side.
Yeah.
Catch up.
Well, you are one of the several people now who named, you've got a little boy with Mark's name in it, Calvin Forrester Wilson. And that's pretty cool. I guess he's 4 years
we think
old
so.
now, huh?
Yeah, he just turned 4 last month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate that. And Wes, you have been very good to us. We didn't know who you were. I don't think, but you reached out to us pretty quick. And I remember being at Dover for the dignified transfer, and Cal's family was not there, but I remember them calling their names or saying Calvin's name because they were telling us the order they're going to bring their bodies out of the aircraft. But I do remember meeting Dale. Dale was there, who escorted Calvin, and I didn't know who he was. I remember him. We met him. He knew Mark. He kind of told us real quick, he had gotten injured. I think he got shot in the foot. Is that right?
Yeah, he got shot in the foot, I think August 8th, but yeah, early August.
And so he had said Mark had definitely helped him get out of some hairy situations, and I wish I had known, I had understood the connections even then, that Calvin was there. He and Mark were killed almost together. I don't guess any of us knew that at that time.
Yeah, they definitely were.
We certainly appreciate your friendship to Mark and for your service to our country. You're still doing it, man. And I know you're home just temporarily and then headed back out, and you've gone through some tough training, there as an SF guy. And I just encourage people listening to check out Mark's book if you haven't. Wes is definitely a part of that, and you're a big help to me for getting that together, and to Matthew Glencoe, who was helping me out. So we thank you very much. And the picture that's part of this post on my website is you, Wes, with your son. Which son is that?
That's Briggs, who was at the time my only son. Now he's my oldest son. Yeah.
Yeah, so that picture was taken back in 2012 at when Mark's portrait presentation was held by the American Fallen Soldiers Project with Phil Taylor, and you and Matthew Duffy drove up to that ceremony at the University of Alabama. In fact, I think you surprised us. I didn't. No, I think we knew you were coming, but we didn't know Duffy was coming. Sounds something like that.
Yeah. I had asked him if he wanted to come up because he was in town. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time. I really, we're recording this here on the 27th at night, and this is going to release on the 29th, which would be 8 years since Mark was killed in Afghanistan. I talked to my mom today, and this is a very hard day for her today, the 27th, because it's the last time she talked to Mark. He called her and let her know that she may not hear from him for a little while because he is going to be on a mission. And so it's been a long time since she's heard from him. But ever since that call, it just put her in a funk. She said the 27th was her last lucid day. I didn't really even realize that, or I'd forgotten it. It's crazy. There's things that I think I would know, and it just takes forever to kind of have to get little bits and pieces at a time, or I can only remember bits and pieces at a time. I guess we'll sign off. Appreciate everyone listening. Just if you want to read the show notes, just go to thadforster.com/Wes Wilson, or you can go to patriottothecore.com and then just search for Wes Wilson, or go to the podcast link from there. But Wes, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for being also a warrior for God and country.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.